in interesting times. Today's stories. Colombia Foreign Minister says trucks with aid for Venezuela have been arranged to return.
El presidente Duque es proteger la integridad de las personas en
The closing ceremony of Vatican's Child Abuse Summit.
La misericordia riposa la nostra speranza.
Civilian deaths in Afghan war hit record in 2018.
18 witnessed deplorable levels of harm inflicted upon them.
Hanoi prepares for the Trump-Kim summit.
Nay tôi cùng với các bạn đạp xe quanh.
South Koreans are fearful of U.S. troop withdrawal.
는 거의 폐허가 되지 않을까요? 폐허가 된다고 봐요.
Japan's Okinawa votes on the controversial U.S.-based move.
なかなかね、こういう自分たちが
A U.S. plane with aid for Venezuela leaves from Florida.
about 150 tons of commodities.
Plus, the world's figure skaters share their insights into the sport at the ISU Four Continents Championship in Anaheim, California.
It can be anybody's time at any moment.
Hello everyone, I'm Ace Ramirez, bringing you stories from around the globe. And this is Eagle News, Washington, D.C. Colombia Foreign Minister Carlos Holmes Trillo said trucks carrying humanitarian aid for Venezuela have been arranged to return to protect the aid and well-being of the people along the border after high-risk operation to get aid into Venezuela descended into chaos after President Nicolas Maduro's security forces fired on demonstrators and aid trucks were set ablaze.
La prioridad para el gobierno del presidente Duque es proteger la integridad de las personas en la zona de frontera y por eso se ha dispuesto el retorno de los camiones para proteger la ayuda, con excepción de los camiones que tenían medicamentos y alimentos que fueron quemados en territorio venezolano.
Los camiones que regresaron se descargan, se vuelven a guardar, a mantener la cadena de custodia y estarán aquí el tiempo que sea necesario y que el gobierno del presidente Guaidó lo vuelva a solicitar.
A high-risk operation to get humanitarian aid into Venezuela descended into deadly chaos Saturday after President Nicolas Maduro's security forces fired on demonstrators and aid trucks were set ablaze. 2 people, including a 14-year-old boy, were killed in clashes with security forces that left more than 300 people wounded at various border crossings. Despite a blockade by Maduro, opposition leader Juan Guaido had set a Saturday deadline for the delivery of food and medical aid stockpiled in Colombia and Brazil. Aid is also being held on the Caribbean island of Curaçao. Humanitarian aid, much of it from the United States, has become the centerpiece of the standoff between Maduro and Guaido, the 35-year-old leader of Venezuela's National Assembly, who declared himself interim president exactly 1 month ago. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the United States, and I quote, will take action as he condemned violence perpetrated by Maduro's, quote, thugs. Guaido, meanwhile, announced he would participate in Monday's Lima Group meeting in Bogota and called on the international community to be prepared for all possibilities with regard to Maduro. The country is gripped by a humanitarian crisis that has seen poverty soar during a prolonged recession and hyperinflation. Governor Ricardo Rossello said a boat carrying aid from the U.S. territory of Puerto Rico had to turn back after receiving a, and I quote, direct threat of fire from Venezuela's military, calling the move a serious violation against a humanitarian mission that is unacceptable and outrageous. Hundreds of volunteers, many clad in white, were frustrated in their attempts to collect the aid at the Colombian border, pinned back by Maduro's security forces. Pope Francis of the Catholic Church closes a landmark Vatican summit on a pedophilia crisis that has devastated lives in countries across the globe. Pope Francis addressed the Catholic Church Sunday at the close of a landmark Vatican summit on a pedophilia crisis that has devastated lives in countries across the globe. The 82-year-old has warned victims to lower their expectations, saying that much of the work on tackling abuse would be done post-summit. But survivors will be watching his speech closely for signs of change within the centuries-old institution. Australian Catholic Bishops' Conference President Mark Coleridge said in a homily Sunday ahead of the Pope's speech, and I quote, "We do not have forever, and we dare not fail. We have shown too little mercy, and therefore we will receive the same." The Argentine pontiff kicked off the 4-day meeting by calling for concrete measures and handing 114 senior bishops a roadmap to shape the debate on how to stop child sex abuse by priests. This included drawing up mandatory codes of conduct for priests, training people to spot abuse, and informing police. In a nod to those bishops, particularly from Asia and Africa, who have persisted in denying child sex abuse is a problem in their countries, he called on all present Saturday to look honestly at the situation in our countries and our own actions. According to a UN report released Sunday, more civilians were killed in the Afghan war in 2018 than during any other year on record after nearly 2 decades of fighting.
The war in Afghanistan has taken a terrible toll on civilians, and 2018 witnessed deplorable levels of harm inflicted upon them. The year saw the highest number of civilians killed in the conflict since the United Nations began systematic documentation of the impact of the war on non-combatants. 3,804 civilians were killed in 2018. Among them, the highest ever recorded number of children were killed. Almost 1,000 boys and girls lost their lives due to the armed conflict in 2018. The actual number is 927.
The report's release comes a day before the U.S. and the Taliban hold their next round of talks aimed at ending the conflict, raising tentative hopes for peace along with fears that American withdrawal could spark an even bloodier civil war. The talks in Doha follow years of escalating violence in Afghanistan. According to the UN, at least 32,000 civilians have been killed and another 60,000 wounded in the last decade when the organization began compiling the data.
2018 is the UN's 10th annual report documenting the plight of civilians in the Afghan conflict. In that time, more than 32,000 civilians have been killed and around 60,000 injured. The United Nations believes this catalogue of human misery can be stopped. The best way to do so is simple: end this war. Almost 2/3 of all civilian casualties in 2018, that's 63%, were attributed to anti-government elements. That's the Taliban and Daesh, or Islamic State Khorasan province. Intentionally targeting civilians is a war crime. In addition, widespread or systematic attacks directed against a civilian population, including a religious or ethnic minority, may constitute a crime against humanity.
Tadamichi Yamamoto, the head of the UN mission in Afghanistan, said it is time to put an end to this human misery and tragedy. He said the best way to halt the killings and maiming of civilians is to stop the fighting. At least 65 suicide attacks were recorded in 2018, the majority hitting Kabul, with militants responsible for the death of more than 2,200 civilians across the country. The report noted an increase in airstrikes by U.S. and Afghan forces also led to more civilian deaths in 2018, with more than 500 civilians killed by aerial operations for the first time on record. The U.S. intensified its air campaign against Taliban and IS fighters as Washington seeks to pile pressure on the militants, dropping twice as many munitions on insurgent positions in 2018 compared to the previous year. Soldiers are seen in Hanoi, flowers and flags of Vietnam, North Korea, and U.S. are installed across the city as the Vietnamese capital gears up for a summit between U.S. President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un this week.
Hôm nay tôi cùng với các bạn đạp xe quanh các tuyến phố để cho mọi người biết là hôm nay là hội nghị diễn ra ở Việt Nam.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's armored train chugged across China on Sunday as he headed to his highly anticipated second summit with U.S. President Donald Trump in Vietnam. Emulating his late father and grandfather, who took epic train trips when they were leaders, Kim set off on the long journey from Pyongyang on Saturday, with a military honor guard seeing him off in the North Korean capital. His departure from the Pyongyang railway station was confirmed by North Korea's official KCNA news agency, with official photos showing him waving from the train for what could be a 60-hour journey to Vietnam. According to South Korea's Yonhap news agency and the specialist outlet NK News, the train crossed the border city of Dandong later that day, but its route remained a tightly held secret. The train's crossing into China follows days of speculation over Kim's travel plans, as his team gathered in Hanoi ahead of the talks expected Wednesday and Thursday. KCNA said accompanying the North Korean leader was right-hand man and top General Kim Yong-chol, who met with Trump in the White House last month, along with several other top dignitaries. Security was tight before the train's arrival in Dandong, with police cordoning off the border bridge with tape and metal barriers. Bye-bye. Coming up, South Koreans are fearful of U.S. troop withdrawal. Japan's Okinawa votes on the controversial U.S.-based move. A U.S. plane with aid for Venezuela leaves from Florida. Eagle News, Washington, D.C. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You are watching Eagle News, Washington, D.C. South Koreans involved in the local economy surrounding U.S. military base Camp Humphreys share opinions on the upcoming U.S. DPRK summit. With talks between the North Korean and U.S. leaders in Hanoi just days away, speculation is building that the pair could agree to a peace treaty in return for denuclearization measures, and that the withdrawal of U.S. troops might follow. More than 28,000 U.S. troops are stationed in the south to guard against nuclear-armed North Korea, part of a Seoul-Washington security alliance in place since the Korean War ended with an armistice instead of a peace treaty. But with talks between the North Korean and U.S. leaders in Hanoi just days away, speculation is building that the pair could agree to a treaty in return for denuclearization measures from Pyongyang, and that the withdrawal of U.S. troops might follow. For South Koreans dependent on U.S. troops to make a living, that is a worrisome prospect.
만약에 철수를 하면 여기 같은 경우는 거의 폐허가 되지 않을까요? 폐허가 된다고 봐야 되죠?
많이 불안하죠. 네, 일단 생계가 걸려 있는 부분이 가장 큰 거고요. 굉장히 크죠. 거의 모든 상가들이 거의 80% 이상을 차지할 거예요, 아마 미군이.
근데 기본적으로 뭐 어느 정도 동북아 정세를 유지하려면 주한미군이 꼭 필요하지 않나. 그렇게 뭐 북한이 일방적으로 주장한다 해서 이렇게 주한미군이 철수할 거라고는 생각지를 않아요.
Camp Humphreys in the city of Pyeongtaek is the U.S. largest overseas military base, stretching across 14.7 square kilometers to accommodate 32,000 people, soldiers and their families. The camp, home to almost all of the U.S. troops in South Korea, boasts a fleet of Black Hawk and Apache helicopters, a bowling alley, an 18-hole golf course, multiple schools, churches, and cinemas. Hundreds of restaurants and shops ranging from nail salons to tattoo parlors have set up around the base, which is in the final stages of an expansion project that will see its capacity rise to 43,000 people by 2022. Residents of Japan's Okinawa were casting ballots Sunday in a closely watched referendum on the controversial relocation of a U.S. military base to a remote part of the island. The vote is seen as highly symbolic, but is also non-binding, raising questions about what effect it will have, even if opponents of the move, including Okinawa Governor Denny Tamaki, prevail.
税金使われてるしなとか思うよね、その意味法的に意味ないけどこんだけ
投票自体がね
人を使って物を使ってお金かかってるから、ね
ちゃんと考えなあかんなっていう意味では、いろいろ話し合って考えました
はやっぱり、なかなかねこういう自分たちがいくら反対とかって言ってもやっぱり直接国にこの結果としてこの数として現れる大切なやっぱ一票だなと思うので。
The ballot asks residents whether they support a plan to reclaim land at a remote coastal site for the relocation of the Futenma base from its current location in a heavily populated part of Okinawa. It was initially planned as a yes-no vote on the move, but a neither option was added after several cities with close ties to the central government threatened to boycott the vote. Polls opened early on Sunday morning with about 1.15 million Okinawans eligible to vote. The Jiji press agency reported around 20.5% of eligible voters had already cast ballots in early voting by Saturday. The relocation of Futenma to Nago, 30 miles away, was first agreed in 1996 as the U.S. sought to calm local anger after U.S. servicemen gang raped a local schoolgirl. But the plan has long been stalled, in part over local opposition.
後々の基地を作ってしまっちゃったらもう何百年ってずっと固定化されてしまうっていうのもあるので、子どもたちのこととか考えてもやっぱりメリットがあるとは思えないので私は反対の立場なんですね。どっちにしても多分もう基地ってどんどん作られていってしまうっていうのは分かりきってることではあるんですけど、やっぱり自分が反対だよっていう意思をしっかり示すとってもいい機会だなと思ったので今日来ました。
A U.S. Air Force plane is loaded with humanitarian aid for Venezuela and flown to the Colombian border town of Cucuta.
We have about 150 tons of commodities at our warehouse in Cucuta. We are adding to that number with this latest shipment from the U.S. government and the American taxpayers. We are providing hygiene kits, medical kits, food, medicine, nutritional supplements for children. We are trying to help the Venezuelan people.
Now, what do we do if the government of Maduro, the former government of Maduro, does not fall tomorrow, we continue. We continue with the support of more than 50 countries around the world.
Venezuela's opposition leader Juan Guaido claimed the military helped him defy a travel ban by the government of President Nicolas Maduro as he joined thousands over the Colombian border on Friday for a charity concert to push for humanitarian aid deliveries. Maduro is trying to prevent food and medicines, mainly from the U.S., from entering the country as tensions over access to the supplies turn deadly elsewhere. Humanitarian aid has become a key focus of the power struggle between Maduro and Guaido, who has been recognized as interim leader by more than 50 countries. Guaido delivered a blow to Maduro as he turned up unexpectedly at the concert in the Colombian border town of Cucuta, claiming, and I quote, the armed forces participated in this process to help him flout his travel ban. The powerful military's backing is crucial to the viability of the socialist leader, with defections strengthening Guaido's hand. The tense standoff over aid, meanwhile, claimed its first casualties Friday as 2 indigenous people were killed trying to prevent troops from sealing unofficial pathways across the Brazilian border. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres issued a stern statement warning Venezuelan authorities to, I quote, not to use lethal force against demonstrators. When we come back, world figure skaters share their insights into the sport at the ISU Four Continents Championship in Anaheim, California. Eagle News, Washington, D.C. will return shortly. This is Eagle News, Washington, D.C. I'm Ace Ramirez. World figure skaters competing at the ICU Championships share with Eagle News how the sport has motivated to always land perfectly. Eva and Alan Basalahe with a story.
The ISU Four Continents Figure Skating Championships return to the United States.
Landing like a well-executed triple axel jump at the Honda Center in Anaheim, California. What is this ISU Four Continents Championship?
It's one of the biggest figure skating competitions of the season. It's one of a handful of ISU championship events, which means that these athletes are only a few from every country. They get to go represent their country at an international competition that has a lot of prestige. Started in 1999. This is the 5th time it's been hosted in the United States. Rotates between Asia, Canada, the United States, and Australia. And it's really a cool event. It's basically it's all the athletes except those that compete in Europe, and there's a separate European championships for them. This event is about 3 weeks before the World Championships, so it's a good barometer of where you're at on that international stage. And then, of course, from here, all these skaters will switch their focus to go to Tokyo in March for the World Championships, and where everyone hopes to perform really well.
What an exact margin is required for figure skating?
Yeah, the whole sport is details. We're skating on a tiny blade. Our revolutions are counted to the absolute end detail. Our jumps are reviewed to make sure they're fully backwards so that we get full credit, and if not, for each percentage of the circle that you under-rotate, you get a certain point deducted. Again, we're skating on, really thin knives, essentially. You can be as trained as possible and anything can still happen. Obviously, you have an idea if you feel really good going into a competition, but it's ice and it's slippery and things happen. So that's another thing about our sport that makes it really interesting and cool is that, it can be anybody's time at any moment.
How instrumental has your family, friends been for you in your career?
They've been like my rock.
they've done so much for me and like sacrificed so much just to make sure I can skate and I can like have the opportunity to reach my goal and to go to the Olympics. So I'm just so thankful and so grateful for like them and everything they do, along with like all my friends back home who are supporting me and cheering me on every competition.
All of the fans that make what we do so special, because if we were just skating in front of a panel of judges, it wouldn't be as exciting, and you know, we really feel their support and they help us get through the tougher times and celebrate with us when we have the great times.
The final standings for the ladies' competition saw Rika Kihira of Japan grab gold. Kazakhstan's Elizabeth Tursunbayeva secure silver. And jumping all the way from 8th place, Mai Mihara of Japan winning the bronze.
ショートが終わってからショートはあまりいい演技ではなかったのでミスは許されないなっていうふうにも感じていて、すごい今日は集中力がいつもより集中できてたので、そこがすごく良かったなって思ってます。
So I know I did not do well on show, so I thought I should have a no miss for free, and I had to really concentrate on the free.
Alan Basoyahe, Eagle News International, Eagle News Sports. Question for Elizabeth. What do you feel you executed the best tonight in your performance? And also, are you now famous enough to hang out with Dimash Kudaibergen?
I met him once to take a picture with him, but that's it. I hope I will meet him again sometime, because he's my favorite singer from Kazakhstan. So I think he's like the most talented singer I know. That was the question?
That was the second one. The first one was, what do you feel you executed? What do you feel you executed best tonight?
I think even if I fell on the first jump, I'm glad that I was able to do the rest of my programs and the rest of my jumps. I think that's the good thing. Today's free was good also for me. I so appreciate the audience and my coaches and my family. That rank is so surprising for me. I will do my best next competition.
With the Winter Olympics a short 3 years away, could a podium run in Beijing be in the future for some of these figure skaters?
Time will tell, and the world will be watching. Reporting from Anaheim, California for Eagle News, this is Eva and Alan, and we are 1 with 25.
Thanks, Eva and Alan. That is today's Eagle News, Washington, D.C. Join us again tomorrow for stories that matter to you. Visit our websites at Eaglenews.PH and EagleNewsLive.com. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at Twitter.com/EagleNewsPH. Thank you for watching. I'm Mace Ramirez, a 1 with 25.